Welcome. Welcome to this house of the free faith. Here in this hour, may troubled spirits be comforted. May comfortable spirits be troubled. And may all of what we do lead to healing of our own spirits and of our world. Come, let us worship together. I'm glad to welcome this morning Atticus Schoenfelder to light our chalice. Atticus recently turned 10 years old. And as Atticus lights the chalice, will you please read in unison with me our chalice lighting words? We kindle this flame,
symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love, which calls us to work for justice.
Thank you, Atticus, and happy birthday.
Welcome. We do not need to think alike to love alike. This sentiment is attributed to Francis David, the 16th century founder of the Unitarian Church of Transylvania. You are welcome here regardless of how you think, of what you believe, of who you love, or what your beautiful skin color is. We welcome you here today to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation. My name is Noelle Hyman, and I'm your worship associate today. If you're visiting us for the first or second time, please stand so we can welcome you. After the service today, we'll have a coffee time, and we invite you to grab a coffee and a snack, and then look for the welcome circle sign at the back corner of the room to your left, where you can ask any questions you have about our congregation. During the service, if you or your baby need to get rowdy, we have a baby room with a speaker, so you can still hear the service, and so can we. The baby room is over on your right. We have a lay pastoral care associate ready to listen to someone who needs it, and this week it's Brad Colburn. Brad will be at the front of the sanctuary on the right after the service ends. Reverend Andy will be giving our sermon today, and it will be the last on this month's theme, which is covenant. Years ago, maybe decades ago, I was talking with a fairly newish acquaintance, and this person wanted to name for me what their style was, their clothing style, which they felt was an important representation of who they were fundamentally. And I was intrigued and amused that they so comfortably felt they could wrap that all up into a single word. And then they turned to me saying, "And your style is..." And when I realized they were about to label me, my gut reaction was repulsion and a desire to quash that plan immediately. And I'll be honest and admit that I have also tended to think of my clothing as a way for me to communicate something about myself, but to be lumped into a group and a label made me feel that they were trapping me and beholding me to someone else, rather than to my own evolving, unique self. So while they were trying to box me into a category, I jumped in, saying, "It's just me, my style is me." FYI, this is a choir outfit, so don't... You'll have to ask yourself that question later. The visceral reaction that I had to the idea of being categorized by someone surprised me, but it probably shouldn't have, because if you ask me what my favorite color is, I don't have a simple answer. It's any combination of blue and green together, but never individually. And also orange and pink side by side. And also orange next to almost any other analogous color next to it. If you ask me what my religious beliefs are, you would get varying combinations that I would emphasize differently from day to day. Of course, I am UU. 1 year this month now. I'm also an atheist. I'm a humanist. My practice and worldview are some parts Buddhist and other parts yoga. And I know what you're thinking. I'm not just talking about the physical exercise of yoga, but the philosophical underlying system that's the foundation of yoga. I'm a naturalist and a materialist, and I'm especially inspired by the harmonies and oneness of all of nature, including us. But I don't think of any of this as truth with a capital T. It's more pragmatic for me in terms of what makes sense to me, what works for me, what inspires me to be a better person. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one in this sanctuary whose beliefs are eclectic like this. I love that I can be a devoted you with evolving religious beliefs, or even a lack of specific beliefs. And this is because our religion doesn't revolve around dogma or doctrine. UU is a free faith religion that instead revolves around covenant to each other. How we fulfill that is up to us. From some of you, I feel the benefit of your covenant when you sing the Sunday hymns, because I see you do it with huge smiles and joy, and maybe even with some swaying and some hand-holding sometimes. Seeing that is enough alone just to fill me for the week. Many of you fulfill your covenant so well when you ask me how I'm doing, and you're genuinely interested in an answer. For some of you, you fulfill it when you attend a social supper with me and we build or start our relationship. And so many of you fulfill it by sharing your thoughts or talents, whether in the service, in an event, or by participating in one of our many social action groups. All of this, the fulfillment of your covenant, inspires me and fills me, and it makes me want to contribute more love and less negativity to the world.
That was her first time as a worship associate. I say that's great. Please join me in Fire of Commitment, number 1028. It's good to be back. You all sound so good.
It does my heart good to hear the lyrics of that song and to think of my friend Mary Catherine Moore, who wrote them, who's now the executive director of the UU Service Committee out doing good work all around the world. And that's the underpinning of the work we do in the world is exciting and reinvigorating to me. I want to ask, do we have our friend from March for Our Lives here with us this morning? So, somebody is either in traffic regretting their route choice or in bed and will wake up soon and realize that they've made a terrible mistake. Either way, we're not going to let this opportunity go by without raising a little money for gun safety in the United States. So, March for Our Lives, you may know, is an organization that is youth-led that came out of, if I'm remembering correctly, the Parkland shooting. And they have put together what seems to me a comprehensive and pretty bold plan for gun safety in the United States. They say on their website, our platform, we hope, will end the gun violence epidemic in America that claims nearly 40,000 lives every year. If we're going to end this, they say, we need to address the root causes of gun violence. This organization is created by survivors, so you don't have to be one. So if you have cash that you would like to make its way to March for Our Lives to support their efforts in gun safety in the United States, just drop it in the plate this morning. The plate cash is going to go to March for Our Lives. If you have, if you need to pay your pledge, go ahead and do that and make it out to VUU. It'll get to the right place. If you want to make out a check to March for Our Lives, you can put March for Our Lives in the memo line. Just make it out to VUU and we'll get it to the right place too. Is that clear? Clear as mud? All right. Well, if the ushers would please come forward and prepare to receive this morning's offering. As always, we receive this offering with gratitude for your generosity. We'll be right with you. I'm coming.
Good morning, everyone. I am Felicia Flamingo.
And I'm Julia. And today I want to share with you why we have a congregational covenant.
And that means rules.
No. Not exactly. A covenant is more like
So I made a list of rules, just to be helpful. Number 1, everyone must eat breakfast before they come to VUU.
What? No. You're talking about rules, and rules don't move me.
Well, number 2 is everyone should dress nicely.
But you're making rules and telling people what to do. A covenant is more like a promise. Think like a marriage.
Oh, a covenant. I think the kids all made a covenant in all of their classes, and they agreed to let one person talk at a time. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And we have a covenant as a congregation. And I would like us, those of us who can read off the screen here, to read this covenant together. Love
is the
of this congregation. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in friendship. Thus do we covenant.
Well, some of those words were kind of big. Do you think everybody understood what we were saying?
That's a good point. So think of it this way. We believe in love. We believe in looking for truth in all kinds of places like science and religion and yoga. And helping people is our prayer, our action in the world. If that's true for anyone, they can join our congregation.
I get it now. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be in covenant with you, Felicia, and with all of you. Let's sing together.
So the kids are staying in the service today. It's a multi-generational service, so we're not doing our Bridge of Love, but we're still going to sing Joy to the World. Please rise as you're able. Joy to the world. To the fishes in the deep blue sea, joy to you and me. Again, joy to the world. All the boys and girls now, joy to the fishes in the deep blue sea, joy to you and me. One last time, joy to the world. All the boys and girls now, joy to the fishes in the deep blue sea, joy to you and me. Tag it. Joy to you and me. One more time. Joy to you and me. Please be seated. If you're wondering why I'm a little bit giddy, I've just come back from Prague in Ireland, and I spent almost 40 hours in transit. I did stay at a scummy little hotel in Chicago near O'Hare because all the flights were canceled due to lightning. Anyway, I just got in last night and went to Prescott, and I just drove in this morning, and I'm like, wow, this is fun, this congregation. It's so great to be here, and I want to especially thank Beth Wyman and Jill Kalegi for helping with 3 choir rehearsals while I was gone. You'll hear the choir later, and they were awesome. I said, did you do this on purpose to make me really unhappy that I'm leaving the end of November? Oh, they sound great. So what a thrill to come back and be with you all again. Thank you. We will be moving now into a time of meditation and prayer. We're going to start with special music. Then we'll move into Andy's prayer. And then we'll all sing together, Shall We Gather at the River.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round and tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round and tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round and tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
As David continues to play quietly, will you join me in a spirit of prayer? We offer gratitude this morning for the turning of the seasons, for the fact that things don't stay the way they are, and that with our shared effort they can be better tomorrow than they are today. Yet even as we express our gratitude, we acknowledge, as is the human condition, that the turning of seasons is tinged with sorrow. As our lives progress and time passes, may we be aware of the limited time we have here. May we be at work accomplishing what it is we feel we're called to accomplish. We give thanks for Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation, this shared mission of ours of uniting across faith traditions, a mission of love and service and justice. As we're looking at a big new phase in our future and supporting the day-to-day work of this mission, how grateful we are for a community like this one to do this work in. We pray for our nation, for our leaders, and for us. Whatever happens next in Washington, D.C., or up the road at the State Capitol building, in a year or two, may we find ourselves stronger, more resilient, more ready to take on big issues united together. We pray, as we do every week, for those in the United States who are affected by gun violence, including the 11,085 people who have died this year, including 252 just this week. Many of us in this congregation know people or were ourselves directly affected by gun violence. We pray that it'll get better, but not on its own. We know it won't get better on its own. We call ourselves to the work of making it better. The song that we're about to sing, for some people, symbolizes heaven. But I figure there's a river of truth, a river of compassion, of love for our fellow beings that we can all gather around even now. Shall we gather at the river? May the answer be yes together. Amen.
the shining river. Soon our pilgrimage will cease. Soon our happy hearts will quiver with a melody of peace. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God.
When I was a kid, we'd have baptism on Sundays. We would gather at the little river not far from the church. One of the preachers said if being baptized in a creek was good enough for Jesus, it was good enough for us. So that's where we went, and it was freezing cold. But we always, at the end of the service, sang that song. And I love now singing it with you. Because I think of those folks, and I think of you all, and I think there's connection. And that we can maintain connection across divides. I really think we can. And sometimes music helps, and sometimes poetry helps, something a little softer than ideas and words. But thanks for singing so beautifully on that song that's close to my heart. Well, like me, most of us were not raised Unitarian Universalist. If you are a cradle Unitarian Universalist, will you raise your hand? So a hearty 7, 8, 9 people. All right. Very good. 10? I'm not looking behind me, am I? Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, God bless you. We're glad you're here. You have a lot to teach us. Some of us were raised in a fundamentalist religion, eventually came to believe differently. Some of us grew up in homes with no religious participation and found ourselves needing a community in which we could act out our values with other people. Some people were simply looking for a justice-focused congregation. There are a lot of reasons why we become Unitarian Universalists. And many of our extended families are puzzled at this faith tradition we've found. When they hear that some of us believe in God and some of us don't, I've heard some people say something like, if I didn't have God, or if I didn't have the instructions in the Bible, I don't know what would keep me from murdering and stealing. They seem to think if it wasn't for God, they would become Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean. These folks will be deeply disappointed, by the way, in the personal lives of the atheists I know. Well, now, I know that line of criticism that if I didn't have the rules in the Bible can seem laughable, but I have to admit, I wonder if there's a kernel of truth for all of us in what they're saying. We are, to some degree, evolutionarily wired to look out for ourselves no matter what. If you don't believe me, go to a soccer field sometime and watch the parents. Our basest tendencies on full display. To create societies, especially democratic ones like the one we aspire to in the United States, we have to agree together on rules that limit our behavior and its harmful impact on other people. At its most basic level, that agreement, that big, broad, sort of implicit agreement on the rules of a society is, in its way, a covenant, a promise in which all of the multiple parties have a part in keeping the covenant alive. Now, we Unitarian Universalists hope for a little more out of our covenants than for folks not to kill and steal. Our covenants are designed to help us create communities and eventually a world that follows the lead of love and justice more often than not. Allow me a little theological history. I promise it will hurt very little. So, Unitarian Universalists, as you cradle yous already know, are religious descendants of the Puritans. Some Puritans came here simply wanting to purify the Church of England from its political corruption. But it soon became clear that what was emerging in New England was a new church, not just a branch of an old one. Questions were arising. Should there be, in this new church, in this new, to them, land, elected or appointed leaders? Should there be something like a ruling presbytery to direct the workings of the congregations? Or should congregations have autonomy? Where was the line between church and state? To be a voting citizen, a person had to be a member of the church. But membership requirements were stringent. You had to take an academic quiz to gain entry, and a lot of people didn't qualify. What's more, if a person was booted from the church, they lost their voting rights. People were arguing about whether this was right. And England was increasingly worried about what was going on in New England. English Parliament favored having religious authorities in charge of congregations and was concerned that the colonial churches governing themselves was a sign of chaos in the development of the new colonies. Something was needed to show England that the churches were thoughtfully governing themselves, not just a sort of chaotic mess. So the General Court of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1646 invited congregations to send delegates to the Synod of Cambridge. Their charge was to talk until they came up with a system of church governance and discipline to which all of the New England congregations could ascribe. The churches elected delegates to send to the synod, but immediately, when they elected the delegates, the churches made it very clear that as soon as the synod was over, the delegates' temporary power to speak for the congregations ended too. They were very concerned about authority in religion. So the synod gathered for its meeting at Cambridge College in 1646, and it was a big deal. Historian Henry Wilder Foote tells us, quote, the General Court thought it convenient that the order be given to the auditor to send 12 gallons of sherry and 6 gallons of white wine as a small testimony of the court's respect to the assembly in Cambridge. The tradition of alcohol at church gatherings goes back a long way for us. After 3 sessions over a period of 2 years, the Cambridge Synod issued its report, a platform on church discipline, sometimes called the Cambridge Platform. It was issued in 1648. It set out a way of doing church that had rarely been practiced since the 2nd century. Maybe not then. They stated that there's no greater authority than the local congregation. And they talked about ways to work together too and to hold each other accountable. But they said that each congregation should be able to call its own leaders, should be able to decide who would be accepted into membership, and should be able by itself to remove people from membership. No bishops, no presbytery. What defined a church wasn't right belief or acceptance by a hierarchy. Most importantly, they defined a church or a congregation as simply a group of people of faith gathered by a covenant. The earliest of those covenants in New England were simple statements of agreement to walk together. The Salem Covenant of 1629 is one sentence. We covenant with the Lord and with one another, and do bind ourselves in the presence of God to walk together in all his ways, according as he is pleased to reveal himself unto us in his blessed word of truth. We might say, we insist on freedom to seek knowledge. A creed would begin, we believe, and go on to list presumed shared beliefs. But a covenant began, we covenant with one another too. It implies an agreement to a way of living, not necessarily a way of believing about what we can't see. Still today, Unitarian Universalist congregations are gathered around covenant rather than creed. Can you imagine if I asked you to recite a list of beliefs about the supernatural that I insisted we all shared? How would that go for me? Not great. But there is a covenant question that lives, for me at least, with what are we in covenant, and with whom? Well, first, I would argue that we're in covenant with what Unitarian theologian and minister James Luther Adams called, quote, the ground of freedom, that sustaining, judging, transforming power not made with hands. Some call this God, others the inimitable human spirit. Whatever the name we give it, Unitarian Universalists are in covenant with that thread in human action and history that leads us toward greater justice, fuller inclusion, and more love for our fellow human beings. And the job of the Free Congregation then is to invite more and more people into what James Luther Adams called a caring, trusting fellowship that protects and nourishes their integrity and spiritual freedom. It protests against the infringement of autonomy or participation, whether it be in the church, the state, the family, or daily work. In other words, the Free Congregation invites. It does not coerce. There are times, like the annual stewardship drive, when a UU minister might wish they had a hell to threaten people with. But alas, not really. We're committed to that thread of love, the ground of freedom, and so we make our appeal from that foundation. This is a profound statement of faith. Faith that in spite of all the harm you and I could choose to do, in spite of our sometime desire to just check out and forget the greater good, there is a spark of the divine in the human spirit that responds to the call of love. That's our faith statement. And so we're in covenant with the ground of freedom, that spark, and we will attempt together through all the many gifts we bring to create a caring, trusting fellowship that protects integrity and spiritual freedom. Now, maybe you say, easy. But not so, actually. Because there are times when folks become so convinced they're right that they believe their position is beyond critique. We're all in danger of this. They find other people who agree with them and they form a purity posse. Are you in or are you out? And outsiders aren't just wrong, they're inherently tainted somehow, like the liberal version of original sin. I've seen it recently in activism, and maybe you have too. Liberalism, religious and political, can go so far as to come full circle to authoritarianism. But if we are to remain in covenant with the ground of freedom, to quote the Quran, there must be no compulsion in our religion. Instead, in this free community, we're invited to bring our full selves, our ideas and our emotions and our thoughts and our fears, and not only share those positions with other people, but listen and be informed by other people's positions as well. James Luther Adams again said about this, "I call that church free, which in charity promotes freedom and fellowship, seeking unity and diversity. This unity is a potential gift sought through devotion to the transforming power of creative interchange and generous dialogue, but it will remain unity in diversity." So we're in covenant to that which is beyond us. But that's not possible unless we're in covenant with the flesh, blood, and spirits of those around us. And this is where things get tricky. I find it much easier to follow the call of love when I don't have to talk to anybody. In those glorious morning moments when no word has yet escaped my lips, with a mug of coffee in my hand, when no person has yet tried to converse with me, I am a veritable beacon of love and justice. I have the potential to solve all injustices in creative and caring ways, but after a few meetings, it seems a little more difficult to do that. That's because it's not easy. In some ways, it's not natural. But the hard truth is, hard though covenant may be, we need one another. I've been thinking a lot, as I imagine many of you have lately, about Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish woman who's leading the way on climate preservation. She started by walking out of school by herself to sit in front of the Swedish Parliament with a sign that read, "School Strike for Climate." Before long, she was joined by other students, and then a couple weeks ago, and it continues, I hear, millions of people turned out for climate marches. I think Greta's just about the most amazing human being I've ever heard of. I also think it's unhealthy and maybe shameful to expect a 16-year-old to change the world for us. She can't. If her effort had remained a solo effort, if she was still sitting alone in front of Parliament, I don't know that we would have heard about her. But people joined in, and because of that, Greta's leadership stands a real chance of making a lasting difference. We need one another to accomplish the things to which love calls us. Climate preservation, racial justice, immigration justice, LGBTQ plus inclusion, animal rights, all these things require us to band together to solve shared problems. So called onward by that force which is greater than us, yet in each of us, we band together in covenant. In our new member classes, I'm careful to point out to those looking to join the congregation that you don't have to believe or not believe anything about the supernatural to be a member of this free congregation. We're not centered around beliefs about the supernatural. We have atheists and theists and a lot of I don't knowists, which I'm one of most days. What we're clear about is that to be a member of this congregation, a person must be able to assent to our congregational covenant. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in friendship. That's our covenant. Now that might sound pretty easy, but that's not the kind of statement that says you can believe whatever you want. What does it mean? What would it mean if a member of this congregation started espousing neo-Nazi views? Well, we'd have to make some hard decisions and have some hard conversations about what our definition of love is and what it is not. It is not, our covenant is not a blanket statement that everyone can agree to. It calls us to certain work, certain ways of being. And so, and in our covenant too, we promise not to run off on our own and try to save the world in the name of VUU. Instead, we believe that power is more effective when it's creative, and so we covenant to love, or collective rather. Power is more effective when it's collective. And so we covenant to love, to serve, and to grow spiritually as a community. For people living in a capitalist society like ours, I think this is deeply countercultural. I worry about the creep of consumerism into our congregations. So many of us expect everywhere we go to be sold things, to be pitched, and to consume products, to simply sit and be impressed. People show up at houses of faith like this one with that mindset, of course we do, looking to consume products created by congregational staff and a few key volunteers. But that isn't what a free congregation is about. Here we covenant to always be co-creating this congregation we love. George Kimmich Beach writes, "From the church as a community, one is entitled to expect care and concern for one's own well-being." That's true. But one is equally obligated to express care and concern for others. So there's an element of commitment in the act of joining a church, which the covenant expresses. Not simply consumers, but co-creators of a community that will sustain us, yes, but because of our work will sustain the people around us too when times are tough for them. What do you come ready to contribute to this covenant community? Certainly finances are a part of that. You'll hear all about our hopes for the future and how your financial contributions can help make them possible at the lunch after the service. The generosity of members of a free congregation is the only way we can accomplish our mission. There is no magical source of funding. The Puritans made sure of that when they severed church and state. No more tax money to churches, all of a sudden, religious organizations. But this congregation will also not be the same if you don't share with others your pursuit of the truth, what you're learning, your hopes, your strategy for solving big problems, that skill you have that could be helpful in achieving our shared mission. VUU is richer, and our mission is made more possible with every single contribution from every one of us. We need one another. And we're going to hear from the choir now. Wait till you hear them sing this song. A beautiful song about an ancient verse in the Hebrew book of Micah. I think what is required for us in covenant, and Micah came from the community from which we sort of lift the tradition of covenant. What has been expected in covenant has been the same for a long, long time. To love mercy, and to act justly, and to walk humbly. May we do just that. Amen.
With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? God has told you, what mortal, what is good. Is good.
Well, well then, please join me in reading our chalice lighting, or chalice extinguishing, rather, words. Though we extinguish the
chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May it guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again.
So you may know that this morning's a big morning in the life of the congregation, and we're glad that you're here. We have some instructions as we get ready to go. Immediately after service, right now, our VUU combined campaign, both the capital campaign and the yearly stewardship campaign, will host a sandwich lunch for everyone. Even if you didn't send an RSVP, we'd love for you to stay and spend some time with us. Please pick up your food on the patio and come back here and take a seat to start to enjoy your lunch. As soon as everyone is served, there will be a short presentation about the campaign, and afterward you're invited back to the patio for our, what the committee is calling Sunday Sundays, ice cream with lots of toppings. So rather than the typical benediction, I want to just give thanks for our food. This is a blessing that from an old UU pamphlet that I pulled out at some point that I really love. Blessed be the hand that plants the seed. Blessed be the earth that gives all that we need. Blessed be the food we share among friends. Blessed be the love that never ends. Go in peace, but not very far. Grab your food and then come on back. Go in peace.